This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Democrats unveil formal impeachment charges against President Donald Trump. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed receives the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo, warning that militants and global powers threaten the Horn of Africa. And Aung San Suu Kyi goes before the International Court of Justice to defend Myanmar's treatment of its Rohingya minority. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. A UNDP report warns of growing anger across the world as the inequality gap widens. And power blackouts in South Africa shut down mining operations across the country. Of course, all that coming up within the program. But now back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We start the program with some breaking news. A Somali police officer says at least 5 heavily armed men attacked security forces stationed outside the presidential palace in what appears to be an attempt to storm the heavily fortified residential and office complex. Captain Mohammed Hussein said that security forces repelled the assault and killed at least 2 of the attackers, while gunfire could be heard in the area nearby. Now, turning to our top story today, U.S. House Democrats have unveiled 2 articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. The formal charges include abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The abuse of power charge stems from allegations that President Trump pressured the Ukrainian president to investigate his rival Joe Biden. Democrats allege Trump withheld military aid as a condition of this request. The House of Representatives will now vote on whether to pass the articles of impeachment. Democrats currently hold a majority in the House. If passed, the Republican-controlled Senate will be forced to hold an impeachment trial.
Today, in service to our duty to the Constitution and to our country, the House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors.
Well, let's bring you more on this. We're now joined by CGTN's Sean Caleb's live with us from Washington. Sean, we've heard an analyst refer to today's events as the point of no return for Donald Trump. Just talk us through the significance of what happened today at the U.S. Congress.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it, because now U.S. President Donald Trump is only the 4th president in the United States history to face being removed for office for impeachment. And I believe that was Gerald Nadler who we heard speaking about bringing the charges today with the House Judiciary Committee. And they are very serious charges. Basically, we've heard House Democrats say again and again that that Trump has basically acted with impunity, putting himself above the law. Went on to say that he is a threat to the U.S. Constitution and a threat to democracy as well. Very serious charges. But as you mentioned, the United States is very polarized as well, and not just voters. If you look at the congressional members along party lines, it is expected that they are going to vote along party lines once they begin what is certainly going to be some fiery discussion on Capitol Hill. Donald Trump, for his part, has said that this is all, again, simply a witch hunt. And he said that there's absolutely no proof. This is all baseless. He wants to get it away, to go away, calling the Democrats do-nothing Democrats. But, Lindy, very, very serious charges. The point of no return is a very good way to put this. And we're going to hear a lot in the coming days as we move toward the Christmas holidays here in the United States. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said she wants to move very rapidly on this and have it vote on this before Christmas.
And as you say, Sean, serious charges indeed. Perhaps just talk us through why these congressional leaders are focusing on these 2 specific charges.
Yeah, I think that's also going to be very key, because there was a lot of speculation ahead of the announcement today. Would Donald Trump also be accused of obstruction of justice for the ongoing Mueller investigation? To break that one down, that was a time when Trump was accused of working with Russia to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, of course, which he won over former Senator, former First Lady Hillary Clinton, but that was not brought up. Clearly, Congress wants to go down a very narrow path. Looking at this phone call that Trump had with the president of Ukraine, basically trying to twist his arm, trying to get Ukrainian officials to launch investigation not only to his political rival Joe Biden, but also into Biden's son, to cause a certain degree of embarrassment. Perhaps that Biden will end up running against Trump for the presidency in 2020. But they are going down that narrow path, looking at the effort to get Ukraine to investigate Trump for his personal benefit, and basically putting himself above the Constitution and above the people of the United States, saying that simply can't happen. Again, Trump operating with impunity, acting as though that he is above the law. That is what the Democrats are alleging.
And Sean, as far as the impeachment process is concerned, where do we go from here, and what kind of timeline can we anticipate?
Yeah, and now I think we can expect things to move somewhat rapidly. There's going to be a certain debate on in the U.S. House of Representatives. Then they will vote on the impeachment articles, which were spelled out today. As you mentioned, the House is controlled by Democrats, and it is widely presumed that they are going to be able to push that measure through. And once that happens and the articles of impeachment have been endorsed, then it goes to the U.S. Senate, where the Senate members will in essence act as the jury, and the House will act as the prosecutor, and the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, will preside over this hearing. It's going to be it's hard to explain how this is going to play out. It's going to be something that the U.S. public really hasn't seen before. The GOP is going to give a full-throated defense for Trump. For his part, he's gone to Twitter once again saying witch hunt. And I want to read one other thing. He also said that Gerald Nadler, the head of the House Judiciary Committee, said that, quote, I pressured Ukraine to interfere with our 2020 election. Ridiculous. And he knows it's not true. Both the president and foreign minister of Ukraine have said many, many times, all caps, there was no pressure. Nadler and the Dems know this, but refuse to acknowledge. But again, Lindy, expect it to happen very rapidly now. I think it's going to be a very hard sell, very uphill battle to win with members of the U.S. Senate, because that is controlled not only by the Republican, but the House of Representatives needs a 2/3 majority, meaning 67 senators will have to vote to impeach, remove Trump from office. So this is going to be a big embarrassment, but will it remove him from office? Probably not.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much. Sean Caleb's joining us there live from Washington, D.C. Now, Africa's youngest leader, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, accepted his Nobel Peace Prize on Tuesday. He was presented with the prestigious award at Oslo City Hall. Since taking power in 2018, Abiy has implemented several political reforms. His efforts towards peacemaking ended decades of tension between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Both countries reached a final peace deal in 2018, and though the Eritrean president was not present at today's ceremony, Abiy did mention him in his acceptance speech.
I accept this award on behalf of Ethiopians and Eritreans, especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice in the cause of peace. Likewise, I accept this award on behalf of my partner and comrade in peace, President Isaias Afwerki, whose goodwill, trust, and commitment were vital in ending the two-decade deadlock between our countries. I was a young soldier when war broke out between Ethiopia and Eritrea. I witnessed firsthand the ugliness of war in frontline battles. There are those who have never seen war but glorify and romanticize it. They have not seen the fear. They have not seen the fatigue. They have not seen the destruction or heartbreak, nor have they felt the mournful impotence of war after the carnage. War is the epitome of hell for all involved. I know because I have been there and back. I have seen brothers slaughtering brothers on the battlefield. I have seen older men, women, and children trembling in terror under the deadly shower of bullets and artillery shells.
Well, some strong words there from Abiy Ahmed receiving the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. Let's get you more on this. We go live now to the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, where CGTN's Koleto Wanjohi is standing by. Koleto, how have Ethiopians reacted to the president's speech today?
Well, Lindy, a lot of excitement here. As you may imagine, it has been a great moment for Ethiopia, a moment where people forgot their differences and shared in the joy of receiving this Nobel Prize. And not only for Ethiopia, we've seen other people beyond Ethiopia going on social media and congratulating the Prime Minister for having recognized in his speech the continent, the region, and saying that the award is not only for Ethiopia, but the continent as well. So it has been exciting, and I think the most exciting moment, especially for Ethiopians, is the fact that a person who is deemed as one of the Prime Minister's political enemies in the Oromia region tweeted and told him congratulations, he has made Ethiopia proud. Now that was a turning moment for many people, because we know there has been a lot of tension between these two people, and the fact that an opposition person or somebody who has been opposing him tweets and says this is a good thing, it has been the most uniting factor in Ethiopia today.
And considering that it is a uniting factor, is there a sense perhaps that this Nobel Prize will boost Abiy Ahmed's reform efforts?
Well, it might give back encouragement to those who are losing hope that probably his reforms are not taking a fast pace as they expected. It might be a challenge to those who are still opposing his reforms, but to those people who support him and those who think that he still has the will and the power to make reforms in the country, then it is a great boost. And also it has given a lot of confidence, especially for investors. There are so many external investors here, foreign investors, and they needed to hear this. They needed to hear such a speech whereby he has pledged that they will continue doing what he can to make sure he changes Ethiopia to be at, a high level. So a lot of confidence for those who believe in the reforms, a challenge to those who don't believe in the reforms, and maybe for those who are still hanging on the balance, then they have to choose. But many people have said the speech he gave was so humble, a speech that did not see him being so pompous, but he accepted there are challenges and that he's willing to work on the challenges, especially with this philosophy of leadership, which he called Medemer, which is calling for synergy and cooperation.
And for those then, as you mentioned, that are losing hope or perhaps are opposing his reform program, what are their key areas of concern?
Well, the biggest concern at the moment is the ethnicity. I mean, since the Prime Minister took over about 18 months ago, we've seen a rise in ethnic tension. We've seen people losing their lives because of ethnic tension and ethnic violence. We've seen some areas of the country, for example, the southern region is still under state of emergency, and the command post, which is the federal police has taken over security there. We've seen people demanding for example, the referendum we just saw recently, but on ethnic lines. So the biggest concern right now that is really threatening the unity in Ethiopia and shaking the Prime Minister's efforts is ethnicity. And that's what people are saying, that when he comes back home, he has done the country proud internationally, but when he comes back home, he needs to keep working to ensure that there is cooperation, especially between the ethnic divides. We've seen him recently, just this month, forming a coalition of parties, disbanding the old coalition that had 4 parties which were mainly on ethnic lines, and now putting in all the regions. Ethiopia has 9 regions, so he has put up a coalition of political parties of 8 regions that have accepted to be part of this coalition, hoping that it will be a step towards projecting the country towards unity. So he is still working on it, but people want him to work on ethnicity, because they say without ethnicity being wiped out, ethnicity tension, then the country may not really move forward towards the unity that people are demanding.
Yeah, indeed. And of course, 18 months might not be enough to eradicate those deep-seated ethnic tensions. Thank you so much, Koleto Wanjohi, live with us there in Addis Ababa. Now, moving to the Netherlands, where Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi is in the Hague to contest accusations of genocidal acts against the Rohingya minority group. She will be taking a leading role in her country's legal defense, an unprecedented move. This comes after the Gambia filed an application accusing Myanmar of violating the 1948 Genocide Convention. The International Court of Justice will be holding the hearing over a 3-day period. Gambia's legal team will ask for judges to provide measures to protect the Rohingya population. The ICJ will then determine whether to provide the temporary protection measures, and a final ruling on whether Myanmar's actions amount to genocide could in fact be years away. Over 700,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh following a military crackdown in 2017.
Why not Gambia? Gambia is a member of the international community. We are signatories to the Genocide Convention like any other state. It shows that you don't have to have military power or economic power to stand for justice. We are standing for justice because it is our obligation under the convention to do so.
Well, Aung San Suu Kyi is set to address the court on Wednesday. Myanmar's government has denied the genocide claims, insisting its actions were aimed at protecting the country from extremist threats. You are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Still ahead, Algerians protest against the upcoming elections as 2 former prime ministers are jailed for corruption. And on Human Rights Day, how one woman in Uganda is helping rescue abused migrants.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
In Algeria, 2 former prime ministers have been convicted of corruption-related charges by a local court. Ahmed, who served as prime minister 4 times, was sentenced to 15 years in prison and $16,000 in fines. Abdelmalek Salal, who also served as prime minister twice, is expected to be jailed for 12 years with $8,000 in fines. The 2 were accused of misappropriation of public funds, abuse of power, and granting undue privileges, charges they've both denied. Furthermore, the court jailed 2 former ministers for 10 years each for the same crimes, while 2 businessmen were convicted for involvement in corruption. The court rulings come days ahead of a planned presidential election, which protesters have been opposed to.
I think that these trials and the rulings issued against them, against corrupt officials, are very important and will be a lesson to those who are considered in the future, and Algeria can start at a stage of proper construction and proper application of the law.
Meanwhile, Algerians have maintained protest against Thursday's general election. Thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in the capital to call for the postponement of the presidential poll. Protesters are calling for sweeping reforms against what they refer to as the ruling hierarchy. After 10 months of demonstrations, protesters say they have not been offered any real choice in the upcoming polls. Former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika was forced out of power in April, but this only saw a continued call against the overhaul of the old guard.
We're against this election. We're against this farce. We're against the continuation of this regime. They want to impose this vote so they can renew the regime, and we're against this. We want a civil country, not a military-ruled one.
We went out on the street to call off these elections because there's no election with this gang. It's a gang all about being fake and stealing. They're stealing our country and our freedom. We don't want them. They must leave.
Turkey says it will deploy soldiers to Libya should it be requested to. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made the comments while referring to a deal signed by the two countries on maritime boundaries. Now, the deal can allow a joint exploration operation in the eastern Mediterranean. Libya's internationally recognized government settled a natural gas drilling accord last month, with Ankara stating that the move is to defend its rights in the region. Libyan General Khalifa Haftar and his self-styled Libyan National Army launched an offensive on the capital in April and have since closed in on Tripoli since then in an ongoing battle.
If Libya sends such a request like this to us, and if they demand it, especially after we made the military security agreement with Libya, we can dispatch adequate number of our personnel there.
Well, turning to some extreme weather lately, South Africans have been dealing with flooding in many parts of the country in the past couple of days. Especially hard hit was the country's powerhouse province, Gauteng. Roads and bridges have been rendered impassable as rivers broke their banks. CGTN's Angela Coppola has more.
The rain also played a role in the nationwide blackouts, as at least 2 Eskom power stations were affected. At Kriel, there was flooding at the mine and at the power station, and at Camden Power Station they had 25 centimeters of rain in 1 week, which flooded the boiler and turbine hall.
The whole situation started last week, if I'm not making a mistake, on the 2nd last week, where we had an upper system that was throwing a tropical moisture down to our central and the eastern part of the country as a result of scattered and widespread showers and thunder shower.
Residents were caught unawares when the water swept through their areas.
We only have 2 roads actually to get to the other side. There's a couple of cars that went through. The helicopter was rescuing people yesterday. So it's actually quite bad at this stage. I know a lot of people were displaced that live near the river banks. There's about 60 of them that were seeking shelter at the moment.
These floods have actually wreaked serious havoc for the city. Everywhere there are floods, and as councillors, it's part of our duty to make sure that our people are safe and secure. We've seen cars drowning, we've seen cars being swept by the waters, and also some of the shacks, especially in Mamelodi parts, they've been swept by the waters.
The flooding has highlighted several infrastructure issues in the Tshwane area. Volunteers have been working to clean up the river of pollution for years now. They worked during the worst of the deluge and helped those less fortunate.
So over the weekend we arranged a clean-up where we did 657 bags that we removed from the river, and that equates to more or less 25,000 kilograms. And then yesterday the floods came and I went down the road from where I live just to go and see what was happening with the people who live in the compound, the recycling compound there, and it was devastating. The houses were washed away completely. People were just in the streets. They had nothing. They were soaking wet. It was horrendous.
After every storm, there's the sunlight, and then the opportunity to rebuild and restart, especially for those less fortunate, until the next storm breaks. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in the Horn of Africa, 5 days of heavy rains has caused flooding in parts of Somalia and the semi-autonomous region of Puntland. More than 1,500 people have left their homes seeking food and shelter. High levels of water in the Juba and Shabelle rivers have also contributed to the flooding. The Food and Agriculture Organization, managed by the Somalia Water and Land Information Management Project, says there's a high risk of further flooding along the Shabelle River. Since October, floods have affected just over 500,000 people, mainly in Hirshabelle, Jubaland and Southwest states. Several roads have also been damaged as a result of those floods.
This is the house we live in. We were not able to save anything during the heavy rains and flash floods, not even the things to make tea. There were many items lost, including beds, mattresses, wardrobes and utensils. Not a thing is left, so we are living with another family. Last night, we spent the whole night with them, and tonight, it's going to be the same.
You know, the rain carried on relentlessly for about 17 hours, causing a lot of damage to farms, leaving livestock dead, destroying a lot of houses, and forcing many families to flee because of the flash floods after the downpour. Some of the displaced people were evacuated to nearby schools as makeshift shelters.
And in Madagascar, Cyclone Ben hit the northwestern part of the country on Monday after brushing past the Indian Ocean island of Mayotte and the Comoros archipelago. Madagascar's National Office for Disaster Risk Management says no one has been killed by the storm, but at least 172 people have been displaced from their homes. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy has the details.
Cyclone Ben reached a maximum wind speed of 180 kilometers per hour. According to the country's meteorological department, the wind speeds could potentially cause severe damage to the environment. More than 200 millimeters of rain is also expected in the country in the next few days. This has triggered officials in Madagascar to issue a red alert in the country's western Boyenne region and a yellow alert its neighboring surrounding.
There are already sites to shelter people who do not have a home. The NBRCM has already pre-positioned food at the storage warehouses.
The government says there is a high chance that there could be widespread flooding in vulnerable areas. Coastal residents have been advised not to venture into the ocean until the danger had passed. Meanwhile, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says an emergency operations team has been deployed to the Boyenne region. People living in flood-prone areas will be evacuated and schools closed as a preventive measure.
The implementation of evacuation transport is ready, whether it be rolling stock, speedboats or canoes.
Madagascar is regularly hit by cyclones and other tropical storms. Cyclone Ava killed 51 people in January last year, and 2 months later, Tropical Storm Eliakim displaced around 19,000 inhabitants. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
In other news, the search for a better life has led thousands of young Africans to embark on long and treacherous journeys to distant locations. Many young women have ended up in Middle Eastern countries where they've been subjected to inhumane treatment. Now, as the world commemorates UN Human Rights Day, one woman in Uganda is trying to rescue these girls and reunite them with their families back home. CGTN's Isabel Nakiria reports.
Mariam Mwiza is fighting to end human trafficking in Uganda. Her work started in 2018 when she came across a Facebook post of a girl stuck in a detention center in Oman.
I really felt so touched. I was like, really? Is this happening in my own country? In that happening almost to people of my age? And their rights being violated to this extent.
Every year, hundreds of girls are trafficked from Africa to Middle Eastern countries in search for jobs. Labor agencies in Uganda work with foreign firms to recruit girls as domestic workers. But some agencies are dubious. Many girls are sold as sex slaves, while others go through hard labor and mistreatment at work. And tracing the girls has not been easy.
Some of these girls, they are trafficked or they are taken out of the country without the consent of their parents. Others go on their own. Now it is always very difficult for me to get their families or to let them know that ABCD or someone is really suffering.
Mwiza rallies individuals and companies to solicit funds for her campaign. So far, she has helped repatriate about 95 girls from the Gulf states. She's also brought back 4 bodies that arrived with no clear cause of death.
The truth is, sometimes I feel so scared doing it, but like for the sake of my country, for the sake of my fellow human beings, whether I'll be killed or not, but I have to do this.
Despite threats to her life, Mwiza says she won't give up trying to save girls from persecution. Her hope is to ensure that those involved in human trafficking are held accountable and the trade stopped. Those that Mwiza has helped bring back are full of gratitude.
I can't explain it, considering what I went through. I'm grateful because it wasn't easy. When you go through a labor agency, you imagine they will help you, but when I told them what my boss was putting me through, they never bothered.
It's success stories like those that keep Mwiza going. She says she will continue her efforts to rescue more girls and stop the tears from flowing. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And your business news up next with Uche Okoronkwo.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. A UNDP report warns of growing anger across the world as the inequality gap widens. And power blackouts in South Africa shut down mining operations across the country.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues for taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Now, political leaders across the world could face growing anger from their citizens, and that's if they cannot re-engage with unhappy populations. That is according to a report by the United Nations Development Programme. The UNDP says demonstrations in Latin America and elsewhere show an impatience with leaders who need to address the inequalities of the 21st century. Now, recent protests in the region have also rocked countries including Chile, Ecuador and Bolivia, as well as Lebanon and Hong Kong. The administrator of the United Nations Development Programme, Achim Steiner, called for a 21st century economic model that encompasses more equitable development as well as growth.
Much of what we are talking about at the moment is an encounter of two universes of debate: the statistical, the economic, the income, that narrative of the 20th century that carried us very far, but also brought us now sometimes to the precipice of social discord, ecological collapse, and indeed a search for a 21st century economic model. It has to do with fairness, the sense of unfairness, dignity, things that we cannot only answer in terms of facts and figures.
Well, let's head to South Africa now, where mining operations across the country are shutting down due to power blackouts. Flash flooding has interrupted coal-fired power generation, threatening one of the country's key export sectors. The country has suffered power cuts of up to 6,000 megawatts and triggered failures at its Medupi coal-fired plant. Harmony Gold, Impala Platinum and Sibanye Stillwater all say they have been forced to cut production, and that's due to the shortages. Now, the losses to mining output highlights the economic impact of the crisis at the ailing state utility Eskom, which of course has been struggling to keep the lights on for more than a decade. South Africa contracted in the third quarter of 2019 as a result of a slowdown in manufacturing, amongst other sectors. The situation could get worse if the blackouts persist. And moving on now to Egypt, the foreign ministers of the country, Egypt and Ethiopia, as well as Sudan, are planning to meet in Washington on January 13th. Now, this follows a meeting between the three. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and World Bank President David Malpass are in Washington. They've been trying to finalize an agreement to resolve a dispute over the massive Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The ministers issued a joint statement with the U.S. Treasury Department late on Monday. Now, Sudan and Egypt are worried that the dam could cut off water supply from the River Nile, on which they depend on for their existence. Ethiopia has dismissed the fears and maintains that all pending issues will be resolved before the dam is completed. The latest was the second of such meetings since nearly early November. And Qatar Airways has agreed to take a 60% stake in a new $1.3 billion international airport in Rwanda. Now, the state-run Rwanda Development Board said a first phase of construction would provide facilities for 7 million passengers a year. A second phase, which is expected to be completed by 2032, will double capacity to 14 million passengers per year. The country's infrastructure minister, Claver Gatete, told a news conference that a construction company was still being sought to build the airport. Once the work starts, the first phase will take about 5 years to be complete. Now, the China-Africa Institute and the National Administration School of Senegal have jointly held an international seminar in Dakar, Senegal. The seminar was about China-Africa cooperation and joint construction of the Belt and Road Initiative. Representatives from China, Senegal, and different African nations discussed views on infrastructure, industrial development, scientific and technological innovation. Senegal was the first West African nation to sign the Belt and Road Cooperation Agreement with China. It is also the current co-chair of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum.
I gave some examples of the results of this great cooperation. Already 10,000 kilometers of roads, 6,000 kilometers of railway lines, more than 20 ports, more than 20 airports, many energy infrastructures. So it's a cooperation that has given results, which is based on mutual respect between the parties.
Our China-Africa Institute has started a lot of related research projects, including holding seminars, training programs for African officials and scholars, as well as research on cooperation topics. We will also promote cultural exchanges between different people. I think it will play a very positive role in promoting common development of two parties and the construction of the Belt and Road Initiative.
And heading to Tunisia now, an exhibition showcasing made in Tunisia designs continues across the country until the end of the year. Now, the event is organized by the Agency for the Promotion of Industry and Innovation.
The event welcomed more than 150 exhibitors. A fashion show presented the latest trends in a bid to boost the textile and clothing and leather footwear industry.
This event is a concrete expression of the public-private partnership aimed at promoting made in Tunisia and strengthening the recovery of the textile, clothing, leather and footwear sectors.
The president of the National Federation of Leather and Footwear stressed the need for Tunisian consumers to change their mindset and opt for Tunisian products.
The quality of local products is equal to or better than that of products from some countries in terms of compliance with safety and health standards and competitiveness, unlike uncertified products sold on the parallel market.
Authorities say the value of exports in the textile clothing sector has risen by 6.7% in the first 10 months of 2018. Exports in the leather and footwear sector grew by 11% in the first 10 months of the same year.
The textile, clothing and leather footwear sectors account for 36% in terms of production units and jobs in manufacturing industries. The business faced difficulties in recent years, but now it's booming.
The textile and clothing sector is boosting exports. 83% of the 1,604 production units are totally exporting their production. They represent 56% of all exporting companies based in Tunisia. The national strategy for the development of these vital sectors for the period 2019-2023 provides for the creation of 10,000 jobs annually, while increasing the value of exports from $2.6 to $4.4 billion. Aden Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, whiskey lovers will get the chance to bid on nearly 4,000 rare bottles acquired by the former head of Pepsi Bottling Company, the late Richard Gooding. As a hobby, Gooding travelled to Scotland to find special bottles from small distilleries before he died in 2014. The whiskey auctioneer company said the collection is the largest by value and by volume. The collection includes a bottle of 1926 fine and rare Macallan, one of which became the most expensive in the world when it sold for $1.9 million in October. It, together with the rest of the collection, will be available in 2 online auctions organized by the auctioneer company in February and April next year. Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, South Africa's economy just suffered a contraction and now power blackouts are causing mining operations to shut down. We'll be looking at what this means for the country going forward. Join us top of the hour on Global Business Africa. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The thrills and fascinating frills from Tanzania's Swahili Fashion Week.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
East Africa's biggest fashion event, the Swahili Fashion Week, has kicked off in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Over 30 designers from across East Africa and beyond took part in the event and showcased their best pieces of African fashion. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
A runway of breathtaking creations and color, that's what makes this East Africa's biggest fashion event. Swahili Fashion Week is now in its 12th year, but its goal has stayed the same: to develop the African fashion space and to use a platform to show that there's an alternative to foreign imported brands. The government says it's time for East African designers to produce world-class collections with African roots.
We have to compete for markets. We need to be more creative. We also have to go see shows like these abroad. Don't just stay here. That's how you get knowledge, and you use the knowledge to do better at home.
The show encompasses all aspects of fashion, even a bazaar that captures the spirit and essence of the Swahili culture. Here, various exhibitors display and sell their carefully created handicrafts, arts, and accessories. This is the biggest fashion event in East and Central Africa. The show this year is themed Discover What Makes Africa Beautiful. The organizers have a lineup of 34 designers who aim to prove just that Africa is ready to compete with the best designers in the world. The event was created by Mustafa Sanali in 2008, who says the fashion show is not just for Tanzania or the East African region. It's for all emerging African designers to use as a stepping stone for building their brands.
We as Tanzanians, we have been brought up in a culture that we think continent first. So Africa comes first and then Tanzania. So that's why I discover what makes Africa beautiful. And more so that now we are the chair for SADC. So this goes hand in hand and it will be a theme every year.
The show also gives awards to fashion's best performers. They range from the best male and female models to emerging designers of the year. Algerian Mtongana has been in the fashion scene for over 10 years. He has won this year's Most Innovative Award. Despite the accolade, he says there are still challenges for designers.
Cotton is the second largest export product in Africa, first being coffee. But then again, there's such few cotton factories in Tanzania that manufacture this raw cotton to finished fabrics. Most of this raw cotton go to China or go to Malaysia or go to other countries, and they're into fabrics and they come back and we get to work with them, and then we need to buy them at a very high price. That's a big challenge.
Another successful year for Swahili Fashion Week, but the work doesn't stop here. Organizers and designers will soon begin preparing for next year's event, with the goal of creating a unique forum for Tanzania's fashion, textile and apparel industries, and to connect and share the very best that African designers have to offer. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
South Africa has come out on top once again, from the Springboks winning the Rugby World Cup and now to the country winning the 2019 Miss Universe title. 26-year-old Zozibini Tunzi was crowned Miss Universe on Sunday in the U.S. city of Atlanta. The lavish ceremony was filled with glitz and glam and heartfelt speeches about female empowerment. CGTN's Julie Shire took to the streets of Miss Universe's home country to find out just how important this win is for her fellow South Africans.
It was a moment nothing short of historic when Zozibini Tunzi was crowned Miss Universe. With the crown firmly on her head, Tunzi spoke to every woman who's been told she's not enough.
For me to be able to be here today, crowned as a Miss Universe, with my hair looking the way that it does, and my skin looking the way that it does, is something truly magical, and I hope that it touches every child who grew up the way that I grew up and was told that, they were not beautiful. And it even extends beauty, because it's not just about beauty. It's about breaking boundaries and doing things that you've been told you can never do before.
Zozibini beat more than 90 contestants from around the globe in the 68th installment of Miss Universe.
Tunzi is the third South African to win the title and is the first black South African woman to wear the prestigious Miss Universe crown, making an entire country proud.
Words cannot even begin to express just how proud I am, because she is showing the young girls in our country that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. And it doesn't really matter what you look like or what society says about you. As long as you believe in what you can achieve and you have faith, then anything is possible.
As a black lady as well, you grow up thinking these things are not for us. You can never achieve them. But seeing her being crowned, that tells you that anything is possible. You just have to dream and believe in yourself, and you can achieve anything.
In her closing speech, Tunzi talked about the urgent need to empower young women and address gender-based violence.
Educating the future generation is the best way to go. My thing always is, if we fail now as adults, maybe we can do something to change the lives of the future generation. So I want to challenge men to actually step up, to teach their sons how to look at little girls and young girls as their equals from a very young age, so that by the time they grow up to be the men that we need in society today.
A message that has resonated back home, with even President Cyril Ramaphosa tweeting about female empowerment.
She said we need to teach them leadership. I think that's the most important part. I think as black girls, I think they're afraid to take a stand and just be in front and take the lead and not stand for us men to take control of everything. And with her winning, I think most of the young girls will definitely look up to her.
The new Miss Universe is already using her voice and platform the best way she can. And she's hoping every little girl who witnessed her win will forever believe in the power of their dreams. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
You are watching Africa Live. Your sports news up next. Coming up,